Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second lockdown sessions. And it's a real privilege to be joined tonight by a friend, mindfulness guru. I'm not sure if I can even call you that. A counsellor, mother of five, parent coach, and amongst many other things, Shirley Pasteroff. Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Matty. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for being willing to have a chat with us and share some thoughts, some tips, some ideas on parenting and navigating this whole space of being a parent during lockdown. So this lockdown session seems really apt in light of our conversation tonight. But yeah, just as we kind of get into things, you've spoken at St. Paul's before. You do all kinds of mindfulness parent coach stuff around Auckland. Is there anything else you kind of want to say about yourself as for people who don't know much about you?
What else? No, I think that pretty much covers it. I think parent of five is probably the most important thing at this stage in terms of what I'm trying to wrangle with in my own home. But yeah, my job is as a parent coach and so as a counsellor, and I'm seeing lots and lots of other families on Zoom and Skype through this time. So I've got a bit of a bird's eye view on not just my own family, but also how lots of other families are coping during this time.
And in a nutshell, how would you say your family of five are coping during lockdown? And you can be honest, because I'll be honest with you for a moment. I'm having some of my better moments and then some of my worst moments as a dad. I won't lie. Yeah. So I need some help.
Yeah, I'd love to say no, all of our best moments are coming out right now. But the reality is, I think I have pretty annoyed at least 2.5 of my kids just today, and all of them several times over the last few weeks. And I think I've also seen the best of all of us and the worst of all of us during the last 2.5 weeks. And I think there's not that much middle ground. There's some, but I think there's lots being written about this amazing time for connection, and I think that's half true. And there's lots that's being written about just the carnage that's going on in a lot of our homes, and I think that other half is also completely true. I don't think there's any full stories, hopefully, on either side of, well, it'd be lovely if some of the, full connection stuff's going on, but I suspect most homes are a real combination of the two.
Yeah, no, that's great. And can we actually come back to that a little bit later on the podcast? That would be cool, because you've kind of touched on a couple of key things there. Actually, just as we kind of get into things, I wanted to mention to you, Shirley, an online article that my wife Rach flicked to me, kind of in humour, but almost in tears at the same time. And it was this kind of parody of a meeting of Kiwi or New Zealand children, and it was their secret meeting of how to ruin the lives of their parents during lockdown. Mm-hmm. And it was actually hilarious, and they were kind of had all these different kids kind of reporting in the meeting, the so-called meeting, of their goals and achievements in this kind of their cause to do this, and they kind of highlight some of the stories from the different kids that they're hearing. For example, they go, Selena, 7 from Kapiti, amazing initiative here from Selena. She waited until her dad's presentation on a Zoom meeting started and then walked into the room and vomited directly onto his lap. And then she goes, Jason and Jude, the twins from Tauranga, they put on a 2-hour performance for their parents and insisted that their parents could not leave until they were done. We're told it had songs from The Lion King and that their mother ended up drinking half a bottle of wine in 8 minutes afterwards. And so there's lots of great hilarious examples like that. And so it was really funny, but also for me, it was actually quite poignant too, because these kids they're doing their best and they're saying we've got to increase our efforts to kind of ruin our parents' lives, but the uptake is it's not working, and they're really baffled by this strange phenomenon or magic or ability that they keep referring to about how their parents somehow can just keep on loving them regardless. They just have this capacity for loving their kids, no matter, it's bottomless, no matter what they do. So let's keep increasing our efforts to kind of, mess with our parents and break them as much as we can. So keep going at it, kids. Here's some more strategies. But yeah, it really highlighted, I think, there's so many parents out there who are actually doing really well, doing okay, doing the best that they can at a really intense, stressful time. Yeah, and I just wanted to say, I know you had a chance to kind of look at that article yourself. Was any reflections apart from the great human value from that?
Yeah, the funny thing for me was I was quite surprised by the way the article turned into this really beautiful reflection of how the kids realised no matter what they did that the parents were fundamentally going to love them through it all. I was really expecting it to go the opposite direction, where at the end of the meeting they discovered the breaking point of each of their parents and successfully made it to that point and were celebrating their ability to do that. Because I think the reality is that, and I'm speaking for myself here, is that most parents will have lost it more than once or twice during the last couple of weeks, in terms of the fact that our kids are going to show us their worst behaviour as well as some of their best behaviour during this time, because it's a completely unnatural situation for them to be in, to be kind of locked in with siblings particularly can be just as tricky, if not more so, than parents. And I think fundamentally the idea of that article is brilliant, is that what we want is for, through the carnage and the love and the cuddles and the fights, that our kids get to sense there's a kind of bottom line stability, like a floor that they can't fall through. But I think the honest truth is some of us have fallen through that floor, and maybe quite often, in terms of our rage or our giving up or our hopelessness or our, let's just have 24 hours of screen time because that's the only thing that seems to work. And I'm really interested in working in that space with both myself and other parents as to how we include that, how we include the worst of us in our relationship with our kids, rather than beating ourselves up about the fact that those things are probably going to happen during this time, and that our kids' conspiracy theory, although that obviously isn't true, it can really, really feel like that. And during this time, it's likely that they really are probably going to find our most, some people call them landmines, some people call them buttons, but our triggers, that they probably are going to find them and push them pretty hard, and that we're going to see the rawest side of our kids, yes, but definitely ourselves as parents.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, Shirley. I got 3 daughters, as you know, and I think there's one in particular who seems to have my number and could dial it almost any time of the day at the moment particularly, and it's like I've stepped on a landmine sometimes. I feel really, really triggered, and so I'm waiting for a blog just about me and all the highlights and achievements of how I've been broken multiple times as a parent. So it's, what you've highlighted, I think, is something really true. It's a really vulnerable time and a scary time for kids, but it's a vulnerable time and a scary time for parents. And as a counsellor, what are you seeing? What are you hearing at this time when we're during lockdown with parents and with families?
Yeah, one of the amazing privileges, and obviously all the specific stories are confidential, but one of the amazing privileges of being a counsellor is that I see people in their honesty and their vulnerability, and the picture I see is really quite different to the Instagram, Facebook, many articles out there about how we can be using this time to create concert pianists, or get fit or read through Shakespeare, whatever it might be. And that the reality is that parents are just wanting to get through this with their relationship with their children intact. And what is happening in most homes, although possibly not 100%, but I've been amazed to see it's a very high percentage, is that what existed before coronavirus is just being amplified during this time. There are, for some, especially frontline healthcare workers, where there's real new situations that are what I call red brain, which is where they're involved in the fight-flight emergency response in the brain. But most of the rest of us are dealing with patterns of trigger, patterns of emotional volatility that pre-existed, but are amplified because we've got nowhere to go. We've got no way to get away from those things. So an example of that would be if you're already inclined towards, say, high performance or towards comparing your parenting with others, then you'll be really affected by Instagram posts of children creating sculptures in the garden to Vivaldi or whatever it is they're doing, and think that that's what you're supposed to be doing during this time. If you're not wired like that, you probably are just turning those things off and recognizing they're ridiculous. And actually all your children need is for you to be keeping out of the trigger zone and being in the home together in a way where you're somewhat available for them when what I call green brain, and we can talk about that. But what I'm seeing from clients is most of them are recognizing it's actually not new what they're going through. It's just that it's like a microscope highlighting, enlarging, if you like, the cracks. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's a really useful thing to recognize that we're seeing things in ourselves that we maybe don't want to see, but also that the solutions to those things are much simpler than creating some kind of a little house on the prairie environment in our homes, which is really not, I think, the goal that we need to have at a time like this.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shirley. I think some of the expectations that are perceived or real that are out there or that we're bombarded with via multiple platforms in terms of social media can have the good intentions but actually can be really unhelpful.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. For those of you who love going online and finding creative and craft and input into your lives during this time, that's absolutely wonderful. But I would just say keep it to yourselves or share it with people you know are asking that question. We're a little bit bored. We've got capacity. What are you baking, or what are you learning, or what skills are you developing at this time? But they're really not beneficial for the general public. Most people who are dealing with, being at home with kids are actually on a much more, I would sort of call it a much more primal level of trying to maintain relationships that survive intact through this time. And if you're not one of those people and you genuinely are, your life is enhanced by these ideas, and that's absolutely brilliant. I don't put them down at all in that way. But for those of you who are living with comparisons in your mind about what's going on in other homes and imagining that it's peaceful and that it's harmonious, and even more than that people are using this time constructively to learn new skills or create new artworks or whatever it is, those sorts of ideas, I just think, do the opposite. They make us stress, they make us tense, they make us unable to be grateful for things like the safety that we have, the health that we have, the fact that our children are at home with us and that they're safe and well. Those sorts of things can get lost in the sort of aspirational leaning that some of the media that's coming out with is I think, potentially inviting us towards if we're not careful.
I recently had another parent in the area helpfully actually send me a little link via WhatsApp to kind of go, hey, some of the parents and families who live in the same area as you live have done a photo scavenger hunt. Mm-hmm. So if you want me to send that through to you, so if you're riding around your bikes but you want something that's kind of a bit more focused to do with your kids, I'll flick it to you if you want, no pressure. And I was like, yeah, please do that.
Great.
And so one day Rachel was trying to get some assignment work done at home, so we jumped on the bikes and took my phone with the little photos and tried to find these different clues around our local streets, and we didn't get through all of it. And, I had some little nice surprises, chocolate surprises along the way each time we found a clue. And then halfway through, one of the kids was like, I'm over this, let's go home. But for a while, it was like that was a really helpful sharing of, through technology, of an creative idea to do during lockdown, which was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So that's when those things can be great, but you're kind of saying, kind of use it wisely and sparingly, not just kind of chucking it out online for the whole world to see, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're kind of talking today about tools and strategies for parents during lockdown. And it's just, I think the thing that's really struck me is like, this is, like you say, this is not normal. How do you parent and at this such unprecedented time where parents are trying to work at home or study at home or somehow homeschool their kids at home when they're also home in the same space 24/7. That's such a massive challenge and a new challenge for many of us. Yeah. So I think as a mindfulness coach, I'd love you to share some of your thinking, the theory and the science behind that, kind of the different traffic-like brain states of parents and how that can help parents in their understanding in this current lockdown time we find ourselves in. Would you be able to unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, sure. I think, like I said before, the idea of being in lockdown it's sort of unprecedented, but at the same time, we're still the same people with the same brain and the same relationship with our children and our partner that we had before we came into the coronavirus, and we need to be sort of gentle towards ourselves if any of those relationships were already under a bit of pressure before this time, because those will be the particularly vulnerable ones, but they're also the ones that have the potential to, be deepened during a time of spending more time together. But I think those are focuses that are really healthy rather than the kind of intensive activity-based ones. So the way the brain works, it's a huge simplification of a really complex reality, but our brain exists in one of three main brain states at any particular moment of the day. And they're red, orange, and green are the ways that we describe this. And red brain is how we describe what is known as the emergency or the fight or flight brain. And all of you will know what this brain state feels like, particularly in the last 4 weeks where there's been a lot of panic and a lot of anxiety. So the red brain state is actually designed for emergencies, life-threatening emergencies. And for some of us, that is the reality. For those of us, those who are, more elderly, those with respiratory conditions, those are on the front line in the healthcare services, there is some genuine red brain events and situations going on where the brain is aware that life or death is going on, where there's some threat, genuine threat to life. And what happens, the brain is really brilliantly designed for these circumstances so that everything unnecessary to survival goes offline or at least gets suppressed. So things like your immune system gets suppressed, your digestive system gets suppressed, your sleep cycles may get suppressed, and your relationships can take a bit of a beating during this time, because what the brain does is it goes into tunnel vision, it goes into tunnel hearing. Your hormones in the system are cortisol and adrenaline, your muscles go tight, your breathing speeds up, your breath rate speeds up, your blood sugars that do all their wonderful work in the body stop doing that, go straight out to the muscles to produce tension. And it's the fight-flight brain, and it's designed for the tiger in the jungle to rescue the child in the road. For some healthcare professionals, it will be a very, it may be temporary, but the state that you might be in to make sure that your PPE gear is on or coming off in the right way before getting back into the house to your family. But these are a short temporary states that our brain exists in order to make sure that people are safe. It's really poorly designed for anything longer term, because your problem-solving brain is completely lost during red brain state. Red brain is very much a judgmental, black and white, can be quite an unkind brain state, or at least it's a non-negotiating brain state, because that's not a safe. You don't want to have a committee meeting if there's a child in the road that needs to be rescued. So this brain, you can probably all feel it. Maybe the last time that you were really scared about something, or the last time one of your children said no really loudly to something you wanted them to do. You can feel that rush of adrenaline and cortisol coming into the system, and the red mist descends. Now, the reason it's important to distinguish here is that it is designed for emergencies. It is not designed for solving problems of maybe a disobedient child. It's not even designed to resolve things like if your business is under threat at the moment. It's not designed for coping with, in our house, 7 people in the house. The youngest are 11. I've got 11, 2 twins of 11, 13-year-old, 16-year-old and 18-year-old. So all at the level of pretty strong opinions, plus me and my husband. It's not actually a brain state designed to negotiate and navigate any problems between us, even though all of us are triggered into that state probably more regularly than we would be outside of lockdown. So the other end of the spectrum of the neuroscience of this is what I call green brain. And green brain is a brain that's filled with the healthy hormones of serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine. It's often wrongly perceived as the resting or recovering or relaxing brain. It's actually the brain state that we're designed to function most of our lives in. It has broad vision. It can see the bigger picture, relaxed muscles, deep breathing, lowered shoulders. It doesn't frown. It has the ability to see grey areas in conversation and discussion. It's very good. It's very high productivity, which is why it can be a confusing brain state to understand, not just the relaxing brain. It does work rest and play very well rhythmically. So green is also a brain state we can fail in and get back up. We can cope well with difficult relationships in green. There's a negotiating factor in there, but there is also a huge resting component in the brain. In the green brain, we tend to sleep well. Our immune system works at its optimum, so does our digestive system, so do our sleep cycle. So there's an overall health that comes with green brain. And what I'll go on to talk about, but is worth mentioning now, is that green can be triggered externally, ideally. So a lot of us have a lot of green brain in our normal lives. Hopefully, if we have a job we enjoy, if we have a relationship we enjoy, children we enjoy up to a point. Lockdown has reduced a lot of our external green brain possibilities. I teach on my courses all about internal green brain creation anyway, but particularly during situations like this where a lot of our freedoms are reduced, the ability to produce and sustain internal green brain becomes crucial to sort of relationship survival, but also to good mental health. And then right in the middle is orange brain. And orange brain it's not as difficult to handle as red, but orange brain is the forward-thinking, to-do list, what's happening next brain. And it's a brain state some of us have discovered is drifting away with. It's one of the huge benefits of lockdown is that go, 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 list, what's next, always looking up ahead, which many of us live in outside of lockdown, has actually been one of the high sides that I've seen with a lot of clients, is that some of them are just saying there is an automatic slowing down that is starting to happen in my brain. And that even though I'm still being triggered from green to red, that orange brain go, 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 do, do, do is quite naturally being just happening less often. That isn't true for everyone. There are still many families attempting for lockdown to be super constructive and achievement oriented, and that will mean an orange brain state for the parents. The key to these brain states is that green is more productive than orange. So there isn't much to be gained from the high achievement, performance-based brain, because we actually achieve more and perform better from a green brain state. So I'm sure you've got some questions on that, but that's the very brief science of the three brain states.
Thanks, Shirley. That is really helpful. And like you said, that's a really great simplification of a really complex theory and science behind our brain. So thanks for breaking that down so quickly, so clearly, so easily for us. I guess there's lots of questions that are coming from this for me, but just coming to the green brain for a moment, particularly in this light of the season of being locked down, and how you distinguished between a reduction in the amount of external green brain states or spaces available to us, and as a result of that, our internal creation of our green brain is absolutely crucial. I guess my question is, how can we do that? How can we better resource ourselves as parents? What would you say to parents who are just really needing some encouragement, some reassurance, some resilience right now in light of that comment?
I mean, I think the best place to start is it's actually it's a really normal brain state. It's not a Zen brain state, just for those that are hugely peaceful or spiritual or meditative. It's actually the brain state that our bodies are longing for all the time. And so dipping into it, it's almost like an allowing rather than a developing some new skill. I call it the art of subtraction rather than the art of addition, because green is kind of at the core of our being. And once we experience a little bit of it, lots of people say, oh, it feels like I'm coming home. And I love that as a description, because it's not outside of anybody's capacity, because it's not about capacity. It's about intuition, and it's about the way that we're wired to live in terms of our psychology, our biology, and some would say our spirituality as well. So the way that it works is that green brain is simply the awareness that we're not in a life-threatening situation. And that's why I keep that as a caveat, because if you are, or if you're looking after an elderly relative who's compromised, or if there's any situations in your home where there's genuine life-threatening danger, you will be dipping in and out of red, and that makes complete sense, because you're looking to see if you can mitigate that threat. However, the vast majority of us are not actually in life-threatening threat. And so green brain is completely the brain state that we can be living in, with a deep awareness and compassion for those who are in life-threatening situations, which there are obviously hundreds of thousands around the world for whom that's the case. But given it's not true for most of us, green brain is simply about being able to be present to this moment. And it sounds way too simple, but being able to be present to any specific moment of your day with curiosity. That's all it is. And that can be incredibly hard to do, because we want to control, or we want to judge, or we want to change, or we want to fix, or we want to improve, or we want to just give up and rest. But actually, it's a really active state. It's a state, and I'll talk about how we train our brain to do that. But what we're training our brain to do is simply a really simple level of fitness, which is able in any moment of the day to notice the toast that we're buttering, or to notice the freckles on our child's face, or to notice that we are actually, even though we're all screaming at each other, we are actually safe and well. We are actually not under threat, other than our relationships might be currently under threat of not liking one another for a little while. And that as we re-perceive or refocus our attention in the moment towards, is this safe or unsafe? Am I safe or unsafe? When we move to, I am actually safe, even though I may not like this or have chosen this, there are an amazing amount of things around your home that you will discover, not necessarily gratitude for, but just simply curiosity. It can be the weather. It can be, I don't know, presumably there are things in your home you chose to have in your home that you like, that you may not have noticed for a while. It may be that even while your children are fighting over what they're doing, they're still there, and they're still, in the room with you, and you love them. I mean, obviously, way easier to do when they're being perfect, or when they're asleep. That's an easy time to go and be mindful, go and stare at them with curiosity and love. But we actually need to extend this into situations that are imperfect, and find in them something to focus on. And what you'll find, it just sounds too simple, but that's why we have to focus on neuroscience and not on being kind or good. Morality doesn't help us in these times. Neuroscience really does, though, because what it says is, all I need is a shot of serotonin in my head. All I need to do is change the chemistry in my brain, and I can actually do that by changing my focus of attention and by changing the attitude. So attention is the first thing, which is, what are you noticing right now? And then the attitude is, can you notice that thing or that situation or that person or yourself without judgment and with curiosity? I'll mention in a minute how to invest in that as a kind of fitness goal, if you like, but it doesn't actually have to be more complicated than that. But it does have to be intentional. It does have to be chosen. It does have to be repetitive and regular, so that what happens is your brain starts to get this superpower, which is, oh my goodness, I can actually change the chemistry in my body at will. And that's what internal green brain feels like. And it's very different to a feeling of, the sun's out, I'm on the beach, I've got an ice cream, my kids are playing happily. That's wonderful, but it's external green. And we can't rely on that for our mental health probably at any point in our lives, but particularly when situations come about like the coronavirus, where if our access to green is mostly external, we really struggle during times like this because the internal source isn't something that we're necessarily skilled at yet.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Shirley. I guess a question alongside this around this cultivating this way of being, if you like, in the world of being more present in the moment with curiosity, but then also trying to curate that in a way that is chosen, intentional and regular. Is there anything that you could say to along other people in your life, significant people in your life, helping you to cultivate that? Like when you were speaking, an example just sprang to mind just during lockdown for me as a parent. It was kind of, afternoon, getting ready for dinner time. Yeah, I just was kind of I could feel the red mist descending with one of the kids, and Rachel gently / forcefully grabbed me by the shoulders lovingly and just said, out you go, out the door. And she says, right, go just do a couple of laps of the block, just go breathe, just go cool off. And that's an external, obviously, because my internal state was not green at that point, but that did help shift and reset me, if you like.
Yeah.
So when I did come back into the house, I could just kind of park it, drop the comment or drop the hurtful, mean thing that one kid had done to the other kid, and it finally just I'd had enough of it.
Yeah.
Anything to say alongside that, in relation to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really gorgeous story. I do think there's a really high level of trust that needs to be there for us to allow somebody else to point out either directly or indirectly that our brain state is not helpful. And she did it beautifully, and you have a good enough relationship for that to happen. What I do see sometimes is parents kind of, once they find out about this, slightly using it as a weapon and saying to another one, you're going red, you need to stop going red. And what I really encourage people to do is if you're going to help one another, do it in the way that Rachel did, which is a gentle, hey, I'll take over for a bit. I often think of parenting, if you are parenting with another person and you're not, it's slightly different for solo parents, but it can be a bit like a relay race at times where you just hand the baton over and say, I've got too much red, I'm going to get this, I'm going to go wrong here. And we don't often catch ourselves in time, and we've done our yelling or we've done our crying or we've said what we wished we hadn't said. But if we can catch ourselves and we have a safe relationship with our partner to be able to say, could you just take over for 5 minutes because I'm not coping and I'm going to say things I don't want to say, or even just have a silent code and if the other one can't cope with you leaving, then they're completely entitled to go, nah, you're staying whatever colour your brain is because I'm not coping either. And that's also fine. But beginning to read one another, if the brain states is something that you understand or makes sense to you, to be able to use it as a supportive process, but not as a weapon. I think the safest route is when we can begin to identify in ourselves, because that means that we can still ask for support from our partner. But for a lot of people who are solo parenting or whose partners are out at work, that's just not possible, because there are a lot of parents at home on their own with the children, or where one of the partners is at home but stuck in an office, and the children are desperately wanting to get to that parent because they're unavailable. It's much harder when they're there. So we really are, I hate the word responsible, but responsive is probably a better word, for our own green brain state as much as possible, because it's actually really, it feels really powerful to go from a feeling of developing rage or frustration or about to lose it to being able to focus on something with curiosity and feel the switch in your physiology. It's great if somebody helps you get there, but there's something incredibly, again, we need to be careful of words like power, but you feel a lot of agency when you're able to go, wow, I didn't know that I could change my own chemistry without my child changing their behavior. And it starts to open up a whole different landscape of parenting, which we probably don't have time to go into a lot of here, but the very basic premise of it is that our children are not actually responsible for the colour of our brain. We really are. And once parents get a handle on that, although it feels so hard, surely when they're naughty, we're allowed to go into red. Well, you're allowed to do whatever you like, but it's really ineffective if you do, because our children behave really badly around red brain. They either ramp up their behavior or they become very compliant out of fear and then behave in quite difficult ways in an indirect way not too long after. So green brain is actually the quickest and most effective way to actual behavior change in our children, even though that's not the initial goal. The initial goal is to have a body and a brain that are filled with chemicals that actually bring us a deep sense of not so much peace, but at least just alert presence to our own self in the moment. We don't feel so out of control of ourselves, and that is quite a buzz. It is quite an amazing feeling.
It feels like we're only just scratching the surface of so much we could talk about for hours, which is really interesting. I'm just conscious in terms of landing some of this as we kind of draw this session at least to a close soon, around praxis in terms of are there any kind of mindfulness techniques during lockdown, or one that might be really helpful to use with a child or with our children, and also, as you say, just so importantly, to use on ourselves during this time?
Yeah, I mean, there are heaps. So let me just choose two, because the end goal of all mindfulness practices is simply to be able to live from a green brain state. So the reality is some practice works for some and some for others. So if the ones I talk about now don't work for you, take the sort of heart and the energy from them and see if you can adapt them for the age and stage of your children or for your own personality. The first one would be one for parents themselves, which is to see if you can carve out, I would say, 3 minutes each day. If you can go longer, that's great, but don't make it so long that you can't do it. 3 minutes each day to walk somewhere, sit somewhere, lie down somewhere, sit, in the garden, in the house, somewhere where you could be away from your kids just for 3 minutes, maybe during their screen time, or if you've got a partner there, you give each other permission to have that time, and just pay attention with kindness to ideally your breath. It could be your taste. It's great to do with a morning coffee or to do with a glass of wine in the evening. You can see the bookends of my day, but something where it will be pleasurable to do it. This is not supposed to be a discipline, although it does create fitness in your brain, but it's supposed to be a kind of intentional and relaxing activity. You just need to do it just a bit longer than it's comfortable. And what that does is it just stretches your brain to go, ooh, I felt the shift between my brain being in monkey mind, which is where your brain's just jumping all over the place, which it does most of the day, to being in a state where you can keep it focused. And the goal isn't to keep it focused for 3 minutes. It's just to keep bringing it back, because it will wander all over the place. But if you're using your breath, you just pay attention to your breath with curiosity, how your chest rises and falls, how the air comes in and out of your nostrils. Sounds really boring, but there is a method in the madness, and that is that your brain starts to go, oh, I can go green without any external kind of trigger to make me go green. If you do it with taste, just get your coffee, smell it, feel the cup, feel the heat, take a sip, notice the taste. If it's food, something you enjoy to eat, just take 3 minutes to really notice. And there's no magic in this. All you're doing is training your brain to pay attention to something in the present moment. And what you'll find is those 3 minutes will start to overflow into your day. It will last for maybe an extra 10 seconds or maybe an extra minute or a couple of minutes that you'll feel that green. But what will also happen is during the day, as you choose to pay attention for a couple of seconds here, a couple of seconds there, we call it green brain pockets, that your brain will start to go, oh, is this what we're doing now? Oh, we can actually choose to do this, can we? And your brain is like a puppy dog. Basically, once you start doing something repeatedly, it will pick up and turn it into a habit. You will all know that habit forming just takes that initial choice, intention, and then repetition. that's how habits are formed. So that would be one for yourselves. One of my very favourite ones for children, and it depends on the age. Ours have all but grown out of this now, sadly. Probably the 11-year-olds will still do it from time to time, is an exercise called the cloud, which my son actually designed when he was 12, because he didn't like any of the mindfulness practices I was trying out on the kids. And all it means is when they're lying down in bed, and this is especially helpful if you've had a bit of a messy day, there's been some things said or done that haven't been great, you're not necessarily feeling like it was a particularly cohesive day, or if it's been a great day. But either way, particularly if it's been connection breaking sort of day, when they lie down in bed, and you can do this, you can take ages to do this, you can do this really quickly if you need to get down to the sofa and some Netflix, like I tend to by that time of night, is you just start with their feet. They're lying down, you just say something like, you're lying on this big puffy cloud, and it can hold all of your weight. So just rest into the cloud, and you just start with their feet, and you just notice their day. These feet have been running, they've been kicking, they've been, don't say kicking each other, keep it to the things that they've been done that have been relatively constructive. So they've been kicking, they've been running, and you move up their body. These knees have been kneeling on the floor doing some pictures. You move up the stomach, has eaten, describe what food they've eaten that day. This heart is going to keep beating all night while the rest of the body goes to sleep. These arms have been drawing or, playing table tennis, whatever it is that the hands have been baking. And the head is a really special one, particularly if you've got any anxious children. You get to the head and you do this. It's hard not to laugh at this point. This mouth has done all of its speaking and it's now going to finish for the day. Its nose has done all its smelling, eyes have done all its seeing, ears, and you can get to their brain. And my kids have always loved this bit if they've felt worried about the day, and I said, and this head has thoughts, some really scary thoughts and some really angry thoughts and some really happy thoughts, and it's done all its thinking for the day, and nothing is too big for the cloud to hold, and it can just let it all go. And don't get me wrong, this doesn't work for every child, and some of you will be sitting there listening going, flip, my child would hate that. That's absolutely fine. But there are quite a lot of children who love this, because what you're doing is you're not teaching them mindfulness, you're actually connecting with them. But as you move up their body, their brain is paying attention with curiosity to that part of their body by your leadership or by your role modeling, not by, right, let's focus on your feet together, because then they just fidget and then you just get annoyed and say, oh, for goodness sake, I'm not doing mindfulness with you because you won't pay attention. And now the connection has broken. So leading a child through it so that you're doing it is, I find, a lot better, because it means they love the connection, and your only difficulty is getting out of the room without them saying, do it again or do it for longer, and you'll have to navigate that if they enjoy it. But sometimes mine are asleep by the end of that one. And I wouldn't try and do it every night. Once you've introduced it, you can just say, would you like the cloud? And sometimes they'll come and ask. Don't force it on a child. Never force an activity or a mindfulness practice on a child, because it defeats the object before you even start, which is their brain is in the wrong brain state. So those are just a couple of ones that I enjoy myself and our family has, and lots of parents that I've trained have enjoyed those too, but there are many more where those came from.
Shirley, thank you so much. That's really helpful couple of thoughts, practical applications to kind of almost close out our time together, our conversation. Just coming back to that practical kind of application for us as parents around carving out space. Just wanted to kind of comment briefly, as a church community, as a faith community, where we're all trying to cultivate and grow and develop our spirituality. We've been kind of doing a series called Rhythms of Grace, and kind of one of the foundational ones that we have been talking about and exploring and trying to put into practice a bit more in our lives has a really strong connection with what you were talking about this intentionality and carving out space, which is cultivating silence, solitude, and stillness in our lives. And so for me, that kind of has this link between mindfulness to what you and I have talked about in the previous conversations around soulfulness and cultivating that as well. Is there anything you just want to kind of, for those who have a faith and a spirituality, anything you just want to add or add to that thought around rhythms of grace and cultivating, pockets of silence, solitude and stillness, and the benefit of that in relation to what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the wonderful thing about the idea of mindfulness is that it's just a way of being in the world that matches the way you already are in the world and enhances the best and the healthiest parts of what you're already committed to, what you already love, what you're already involved in. And so if you have a spirituality, if you have a faith, whatever faith that is, then any form of intention where you're slowing down, where you are keeping that silence in your brain from jumping around to all the thinking it often does, to the solitude, to the stillness, there's a real special invitation every time we do that to experience the depths of ourselves in the world, kind of in the best way that we know how. And often, especially if you do have a spirituality that involves a God that is a loving God, that is a really amazing space to experience that love while you're technically not doing anything. Technically. So much of our culture, so much of our frameworks, whether they're within the church or outside it, are based on performance and achievement, and love doesn't sit well with those things. And so when you open up a space within your heart, within your day, to be still and experience the wholeness and the green brainness and the goodness of who you are, there's always going to be a beautiful amplification of your sense of spirituality and your sense also of togetherness, of being part of a global community, which is hugely important during a global pandemic. So, yeah, those two go very much hand in hand.
Yeah, that's so true. They do. And I find that when I can in my own life, just carve out even just little pockets of just slowing down, just stilling the madness in my head sometimes, or the busyness or the thoughts or the to-do list. I'm just so much more grounded and able to function out of a place of calm and curiosity, being more present to people, all of the things we've been talking about tonight. So there is such a direct correlation with that stuff. Hey, I just want to say, if people wanting to kind of know more about mindfulness or mindful parenting and some of the things that you do and offer, it'd be great if you could just share quickly about how people can connect and more with that and the things that you do.
Sure. So you can find me on the website Renew Your Mind. If you look up my name, Shirley Pasteroff, you'll go straight to Renew Your Mind. There are only 7 Pasteroffs in New Zealand and about 10 in the world, so I'm very easy to find. And I'm also just about to release my first book called The Mindful Parent, which will be launching in June, which will have all these parenting tools and techniques and ideas in. So I'll let Matty know about that when it comes out. But on that website, you'll find resources, you'll find our next courses, which will be running in May, and you'll find also access to my counselling, my therapeutic work as well. So it's all on the Renew Your Mind, Mindful Parenting tab in the website.
Brilliant. That's so great to know that that's out there and people can access that and get in touch and get more resources if they need them. Shirley, I just want to say thank you. I want to honour you and acknowledge you. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your support over the years on so many different fronts, but also thank you for this time just together tonight, your insight, your honesty, your wisdom, your practical tips and applications, particularly in light of these unique circumstances of lockdown and how you've applied them to that. It's been really relevant to me, and I'm sure to many who will listen to this podcast. So a huge thank you from me and from the St. Paul's Faith community. Thank you. You're a legend.
Oh, thank you. It's been really fun, Matty.